Takumi finds himself standing before the goddess Nolan. But before he can even process what's happening, she immediately bows her head in apology. She explains that this entire situation is a massive blunder. He was never supposed to be summoned in the first place. When a summoning spell is cast, it randomly pulls in a handful of nobodies from Earth to be transported to another world. However, since Takumi actually had a good life going for him, he should have been excluded from the process. Unfortunately, due to an error, he got dragged along with all the other poor souls. And all of this is thanks to the Holy Sidonia Empire recklessly activating the forbidden summoning ritual. Since he wasn't meant to be here, Nolan pulled him aside while the rest of the summoned individuals were sent straight to Sidonia. Naturally, Takumi asks if she can just send him back to Earth, given that this was all a mistake. But Nolan, looking incredibly guilty, informs him that she can't. She was so furious at Sidonia for daring to use the forbidden summoning spell that she immediately patched it out of this world's magic system. Now, no one can move between worlds ever again, which also means Takumi is stuck here permanently. Oh, and as an added bonus, the summoning process technically killed him, so there's that too. Takumi panics upon realizing that he's literally just a ghost now, but Nolan tells him to relax. She has a plan. While she can't send him back to Earth, she can grant him a new body and officially make him a citizen of this world. And to make up for her part in this whole mess, she'll even bless him with a special advantage to help him out. With no real alternatives, Takumi agrees, and Nolan is visibly relieved since that makes her job much easier. She instructs him to open his status screen to check out the details of his new life. When he does, he immediately notices that she's planning to give him a 17-year-old body, despite the fact that he's actually 40. When he questions her about it, Nolan waves him off, saying it's a minor detail not worth worrying about. More importantly, he still needs to choose his job. She explains that there are two main categories to choose from: combat-focused roles like swordsman, knight, or hunter, and production-based roles if he's not interested in fighting. Takumi isn't thrilled about the idea of fighting, so he opts for a production job instead. Nolan embeds the role into his soul, along with several extra blessings, and sends him on his way, completely forgetting to provide any sort of tutorial. Moments later, Takumi crash lands straight into a forest. After managing to push himself up from the ground, he stumbles toward a river and catches his reflection in the water, confirming that he really has been reborn into a different body. On the bright side, his arthritis is completely gone. Determined to make the most of this new life, he checks the bag Nolan left behind. Inside, he finds a decent supply of food and some money, meaning starvation won't be a concern for now. Curious about his abilities, he brings up his status screen and quickly realizes Nolan went all out. He has an arsenal of incredibly useful skills. Among them is elemental magic, which he immediately decides to test. Holding out his hand, he calls out Water Ball, and sure enough, a sphere of water appears in his palm. He experiments with the other elements, easily activating them all on his first attempt. With his magic capabilities confirmed, Takumi starts thinking about his next course of action and decides to make his way to the nearest village. As he walks, he spots a stick lying in the middle of the path. Something about it seems special, so he uses his appraisal skill to analyze it. The results show that it's trink wood, a high-quality material harvested from treehead monsters, often used for crafting magic staves and spears. Seeing an opportunity to test his modeling skill, Takumi applies it to the wood and successfully shapes it into a spear, eager to see what else he can create with his newfound abilities. Since the wood turned out to be incredibly useful, Takumi decides to scan the area for other valuable plants. To his surprise, he finds an abundance of them, so he spends the next hour gathering as much as he can. However, he quickly runs into a problem. There's no way all these plants will fit in his bag. Just as he's considering leaving some behind, he remembers his item box skill and promptly stashes everything inside. At that moment, a sudden scream echoes through the forest. Moments later, a little girl bursts through the bushes, running straight toward him. She begs him for help, explaining that a monster is chasing her. When Takumi turns to see what kind of creature she's talking about, he finds himself staring down a massive horned rabbit. The beast charges at him with full force, and in a panicked reaction, Takumi blindly thrusts his makeshift spear forward. By sheer dumb luck, the weapon impales the rabbit's skull, killing it instantly. He stands there in disbelief, shocked that he, a complete beginner, just took down a monster like that. His first thought is that it must be thanks to Nolan's blessing, but in reality, it was nothing but a lucky fluke. Regardless, the system rewards him with a warrior job title, much to his dismay, since fighting was the last thing he wanted to get involved in. Shoving that thought aside, Takumi turns his attention to the little girl to make sure she's unharmed. She introduces herself as Molly and explains that she had been gathering herbs when she accidentally wandered too far from the village and ended up getting attacked. The mention of a village immediately piques Takumi's interest, and he eagerly asks if he can visit. Molly agrees to take him there, but first suggests that he bring the rabbit along, since its meat is delicious. Realizing it would be a waste to leave it behind, Takumi tosses the rabbit into his item box, only to immediately regret it when he remembers he was planning to keep that ability a secret. But it's too late now, so he just rolls with it and follows Molly toward the village. Meanwhile, back in the Empire of Sidonia, the other summoned individuals have just arrived, and they're completely bewildered. None of them seem to be injured, but they're all confused about their surroundings. Just Just then, a voice calls out to them, addressing them as heroes. A man named Owen approaches and informs them that they have been summoned to this world to wield their power and save it. He introduces them to the Empress of the Sidonia Empire, Elizabeth. The moment the group lays eyes on her, they immediately get the sense that she's shady as hell. Right then, Akane's unique skill activates. Nolan granted her the blessing of revelation, allowing her to instinctively discern the truth of any situation. And at this very moment, her gut is screaming that Elizabeth is a deceitful snake who absolutely cannot be trusted. He decided to put his blacksmithing skills to the test. Using the metal he had refined, Takumi crafted a variety of tools: knives, nails, farming equipment, and even a sturdy cooking pot. The villagers were impressed by his craftsmanship, and before he knew it, they were already asking if he could make some tools for them as well. Seeing an opportunity, Takumi figured he could start a small business in the village. He wasn't sure how long he'd be staying, but he might as well make himself useful while earning a bit of money. Plus, crafting was fun, and it gave him a sense of accomplishment. Meanwhile, Molly, still keeping an eye on him after his near-death experience, made sure to bring him food regularly so he wouldn't forget to eat. She had also made it her personal mission to nag him about taking breaks, much to Takumi's amusement. Now that he had settled into the village, Takumi began thinking about his next project. He had all this metal, and his alchemy and blacksmithing skills were improving, so he wondered if he could try making something more advanced, perhaps even a proper weapon. He wasn't planning on fighting, but considering the number of monsters lurking around, it wouldn't hurt to be prepared. Just as he was lost in thought, Boron, the village blacksmith, stopped by to check on his progress. The old man took one look at Takumi's work and gave him an approving nod. "Not bad, kid. You might just have a real knack for this." Takumi grinned, feeling a sense of pride. Maybe this new life wasn't going to be so bad after all. He would spend his time at the forge with Boron, learning how to craft various weapons. The blade turns out great, and once Boron finishes making the sheath, it will be complete. With his blacksmithing skill now reaching level 40, Takumi decides to take a break from smithing and shift his focus elsewhere. He heads over to Bunga and asks if he can borrow a few potions. Bunga has no issue lending him some, but all the ones he has are just basic potions, so they won't be particularly strong. Takumi assures him that's fine, since he just needs a reference for what a potion is supposed to look like. He's planning to brew his own using the herbs he collected in the forest, and Bunga is more than willing to support him. In fact, he even offers to buy a few if the first batch turns out well. Takumi appreciates the offer, and after receiving the sample potion, he starts crafting his own version. Using hilcuck leaves and water, he manages to produce something that looks promising, sealing it in a glass jar to compare with Bunga's potion. Both are blue, but Takumi's mixture is a noticeably deeper shade. He needs to test the potion to confirm it isn't dangerous, but drinking an untested concoction could be lethal. To mitigate the risk, he decides to build up a tolerance to poison first. His brilliant plan? Consume small amounts of potentially toxic substances until he's on the verge of collapsing, then heal himself with magic. Hours into this self-inflicted suffering, Takumi is feeling absolutely awful. On the upside, healing himself so many times has unlocked the purification skill, which is bound to be useful down the line. Just as Takumi is getting back on his feet, he hears a noise behind him and turns to see a massive boar glaring at him. Judging by its stance, it's not here to make friends. With no other choice, Takumi grips his spear and prepares to fight. But the moment the boar charges and he tries to strike, his spear snaps like a twig, leaving the boar completely unscathed and Takumi completely unarmed. Panicking, he throws every spell he knows at the creature, but nothing seems to faze it. Just as he's trying to figure out his next move, he notices a poison spider lurking behind him, and from the way it's positioning itself, it's about to attack. Now he's officially cornered. However, instead of lunging at him, the spider strikes the boar instead, throwing off its attack. The boar is still relentless, though, so Takumi needs to think fast. Physical attacks have been useless so far, but there's still one trick he hasn't tested. As the boar charges in again, Takumi leaps into the air and, right before impact, activates his alchemy skill on the creature's skull, breaking it down instantly. Just like that, the battle is over, and he's managed to survive by the skin of his teeth. Now that the danger is past, he turns his attention to the spider, since it technically saved his life. The poor thing is in rough shape after getting hit by the boar, so Takumi decides to heal it before heading back to the village. As soon as he finishes, a notification pops up informing him that he has successfully tamed the spider. He didn't even know taming spiders was possible, and he hesitates to take it with him since it's classified as a dangerous monster. However, the spider gives him the cutest little pleading eyes, and Takumi folds immediately, deciding to keep it as his pet. To make it official, he names her Maple. A little while later, Takumi returns to the village, dragging along the massive boar carcass. The villagers are stunned, not only because he managed to take down such a powerful beast, but also because he somehow tamed a poison spider, which no one has ever done before. Setting those surprises aside, Takumi suggests sharing the boar, since there's no way he can finish it alone. That night, the entire village holds a massive feast in his honor. While the rest of the village is celebrating, Bunga quietly pulls Takumi aside and hands over the valuable parts of the boar, explaining that he can sell them for a good price if he takes them to the nearest city, Bolton. With that, Takumi now has his next destination set. Meanwhile, Goddess Nolan has been keeping a close eye on him, delighted by how well he's adapting. One of her fellow goddesses, watching her favorite Takumi so blatantly, finally asks what her endgame is. She's not just giving him a special body and an overpowered blessing. She even went as far as sending him a whole year into the past, long before Sidonia activated the summoning spell that brought him here. Surely, she must have a bigger plan in mind? But Nolan simply shrugs, saying she doesn't have any grand reason for it. She's just doing what feels right. Back in the village, Takumi wakes up one morning to find himself completely tied up in bed. He doesn't need to guess who's responsible. It's obviously Maple. Sure enough, the little spider apologizes, explaining that Takumi has been so busy lately that she felt lonely and just wanted his attention. Realizing he's been neglecting her, Takumi decides to take the day off from work to spend some quality time with Maple, which immediately lifts her spirits. Just as they're having their little bonding moment, Martha walks in to bring Takumi some lunch, only to find him tied up in bed while Maple sits happily beside him. The sight is so bizarre that she's not sure what to say, and Takumi immediately scrambles to explain that whatever she's thinking, it's definitely not that. Martha takes his explanation at face value, but she can't help but admire the silk Maple produced. It's top-tier quality. A devious plan forms in her mind as she silently vows to squeeze as much silk out of Maple as possible. Later that day, Martha successfully crafts a spider silk shirt, and all the women in the village instantly fall in love with the smooth, luxurious texture of the fabric. Takumi hadn't realized spider silk was such a high-end material, but the ladies quickly educate him. It's considered a luxury good, typically only affordable to nobles. Martha then turns to Maple, asking if she can produce more, and without hesitation, Maple gets to work, eagerly spinning more silk. Unfortunately, this means she won't have time to play with Takumi anymore, which puts a damper on his plans for the day. He was really looking forward to finally spending time with her, but he still has a ton of work to do, so he doesn't let it bother him too much. It's been about a month since Takumi first arrived in the village, and with his plans to travel to the city for further alchemy studies coming up, he knows he'll have to say goodbye soon. But after spending so much time here, leaving won't be easy. In preparation for his journey, he heads over to Boron's forge to continue honing his blacksmithing skills, and before long, the two of them craft a perfectly fitted chest plate along with a sturdy pair of steel-toed boots. Boron mentions that the boots will come in handy if he ever needs to kick something, but Takumi insists that he has no intention of fighting. He just wants to focus on his alchemy. Right on cue, Bunga arrives and takes a look at Takumi's new armor, commenting that it suits him well. Still, he admits he's going to miss having Takumi around once he leaves. But he also understands that if Takumi wants to grow his production business, he'll have to move to the city, where he can sell his goods to a wider market and secure a steady supply of materials.